You have to put the timeline in perspective. A Curacao-based prosecutor starts an investigation on a civil servant in Samaritan, contradictory to all norms that we normally adhere to. The federal detectives normally deal with civil servants. This time around, a group in Curacao, directly under the auspices of the prosecutor general, is running an investigation, making it seem as if I am an exceptionally big criminal because we have to put aside everything on the island. Am I a thorn in the Duchess' side? Yes, I am. I've been very vocal about them, not now alone, but in the past also. What I didn't do in the past, that I did contrary this time, is that I publicly spoke out about what's happening in this new case now, compared to the last.
So you strongly believe that they ought to get you?
At all costs. They got to justify their living.
Based on the situation as is, if successful in the quest to at least receive the okay from the judge to prosecute you, how do you intend to deal with that situation, MP, taking into consideration as well that you're a member of Parliament?
Two things. We are not even at the stage right now. So the court case that was supposed to happen today but was cancelled because of double booking on behalf of the court was the fact that I challenged the impartiality of the judge. And I will discuss that later down. I think I like to leave at least the court run their tenure, but I will publicly state why I did it. And it has to do that when you make decisions that are going to affect the outcome of the case, then you are not partial, but you're impartial. At this point in time, the discussion was, can I see the documents, yes or no? And the Prosecutor General is stating that the details in this case are so explicit that, listen, if they are so explicit and you have such a strong case, then why are you withholding documents from me? The only reason it can be is because it's going to end up just like the first case, where once again, I will prove them wrong in their so-called accusations. Because at this point in time, what they stated in a 4-page document, I can clearly see that it is based on a story fabricated inside. Why does Curacao suddenly have to investigate me? What happened to Samaritan? Are the people from the National Detective not good enough in Samaritan? Is that what they're saying?
Having said that, has it been decided as when the case will be recalled?
You see, we are now at the stage that if the appeal court says no, Mr. Moncampa's case will not be sent to prosecution because the evidence is not good enough, then there is no case. So the only, and that's why I'm saying they are using their utmost right now to ensure that it goes to court by creating now suddenly the indication that I did something, but I can't defend myself on the charges you make to me. You see, this is the catch in it. They're afraid of a Christopher Emmanuel Part 2. Christopher was given all his documents and he defended himself. And the Court of Appeal told the prosecutors, you have no case where clearly you can show that the law was broken. By me, they're making a set of accusations because somebody told them something. I cannot verify anything that's written there because I don't get a document to use to defend myself. If you make a statement, Stephen, that you gave me this, or you did this, or I did this, I can then verify reading your statement if, first of all, if that's what the charges are based on. Secondly, if what you're saying is true, or if I can then take documents out of the file as government and show that what you're saying is not true. Because remember, they said I rigged the bid. They said I took this. They said I did this. But they have the documents that can clearly prove to the contrary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what irks me. Why disallow me the right to defend myself properly so that you can at least then get the whole truth in front. They prefer to get the right to prosecute me, and within 1 week after receiving that right, I can have all documents. But then it means for me that I start another 10-year process defending myself in the courts of law while wasting a bunch of my personal money and the state's money. Because guess who pays for this joke? The people of the Martin do. The people of the Martin pay for the prosecutors to prosecute me.
GEBE has been faithfully serving the communities of St. Martin, powering your home and our economy. Come rain or shine, our qualified team of professionals are working hard 24 hours a day to provide you and your family with safe, reliable electricity and water. We use the latest technologies and test our products daily to maintain the highest international standards. Our friendly staff is always there to assist you, whether in person, over the phone, or online. We are committed to constantly improving our products and services, making them more efficient, effective, and environmentally friendly to serve you better today and our next generation of clients tomorrow. GEBE, powering a brighter future.
Our friend Megawati is here with tips to save you energy. 1. Turn your airco temperature up. 2. Use a ceiling fan instead. 3. Buy energy-saving products. Save some green with NVGEBE.
And what I can say is that there's a lot of collaboration happening now. The Ministry of Public Health, Social Development and Labor, Women's Desk falls under them. And I recently had a very good interview with Ms. Rose Fleming, who is pushing hard for the policy. She works together with the Ministry of Justice, with the Voc Daidat, which is Court of Guardianship, falls under also Justice, with the Prosecutor's Office, and I know Education, Culture, Youth and Sport under the Youth Department. They also sponsor youth programs such as Girl Power within the school. So they go into, I think, like the second forms, or maybe it's even the first forms, but they do follow-ups in first, I think, and second form, because this is the age when the adolescents start to grow into their own. They're further away from their parents, trying to be adults, not yet there, so they get a lot of education. So for me, any programming geared towards empowering, especially in this case where teaching equality. There was another session a couple of years ago where you taught what was toxic masculinity, for instance. And that for me is something, information that needs to be spread through all the schools. And having been an educator in elementary school, it's even more important to start from then. Because as Cassandra said, a lot of children are experiencing it, maybe not directly, but they're seeing their parents in toxic relationships, and it becomes normal to them, and they expect that same type of treatment or accept that type of treatment. Others might run the other direction, but as government, we have to collaborate across the board, education, communication, and of course putting the policies in place to ensure the protection of all, but especially women and girls. And I believe there's another program that is being worked out through the NRPB and the Trust Fund that will also safeguard women and girls and provide more equality. And I think that policy has to be the first thing, because I remember years ago, you make the report, The parents get discouraged or the child gets discouraged because there's not enough follow-up. But there are a lot of programs now, and of course we have to ensure that they collaborate properly, that no gaps are left, because as a small island development state, having enough persons in all the areas is not always there. And for instance, I can remember with the police, initially you didn't have a lot of female police officers, and so if the male police officer is himself a bit of a violent person, they scoff at the female who comes to make a report, so that discourages the reporting. So I know that has improved over the years from, let's say, the 80s, 90s to now, and having safe haven, that wasn't there when I was a child. I mean, and this is like from my own experience. So counseling, having that availability also, and that happens through the schools and through reporting as well.
Domestic violence versus gender-based violence. Gender-based violence we like to look at as sort of a larger umbrella of violence that happens predominantly to women. So when we look at gender-based, it's between the genders, as stated. It has to do with constructs between men and women and how we realize that, what our perceptions are about how we socialize men and women. And there seems to be lots of violence going on, right? So it's the discrimination that happens within the workplace, healthcare, policy. We can go on and on. And domestic violence just happens to be one of those forms of violence that happens under gender-based violence. So it's a particular type of violence that happens in the home. And that's why we call it domestic violence. And your other question, Mr. Christian?
My other question is forms of abuse and warning signs.
Yeah, so the most popular form of abuse that I think that our viewers and everyone here knows is the physical violence, right? So we have the physical violence, sexual violence, psychological, emotional violence, financial violence, spiritual violence as well. So think of anything that a person can do to exert control over another person by using different sorts of aspects in order to control their lives. If we're looking at maybe, let's start young. Okay, so let's start with maybe adolescence. So if we are looking at relationships between adolescents, young people, we would look at perhaps how your teenagers are acting, right? So difference in behavior. So is that if you know your teenager to be more outgoing, a little bit more verbal, if they got into a relationship and then all of a sudden you're seeing these behavior changes with them dating someone, right? Maybe you'll see them being sad, depressed. Look for signs if you're a neighbor or a friend, looking for bruises, hearing voices, screaming like in the house, not in your head necessarily, even though that can come about too. With the longer you stay within a domestic violence relationship, you can actually get a mental illness. So that would be very, very keen to watch out for. But just look at indifference of behavior. If you know friends that maybe it's usually the woman, if she is quiet, if the man is only allowed to talk, just take up any sort of those sorts of experiences, and some things we've just sort of become to accept as normal, whether it's in our culture or our society. It develops to be abuse, really. And many women that go through domestic violence or that experience domestic violence necessarily before they come to places like Safe Haven or before they talk to a friend, they don't necessarily see it as violence or being abused, because it may have been something that they've experienced in their home as a young person, as a child growing up, and from maybe different sorts of family households. So it becomes something normal, but not something healthy, right? So when a person does step out and finally does realize that, that this is not okay and seek help, then is where the information and the education starts coming. But it's our job as community members, as persons who are professional, to constantly bring the awareness and the education to our people, right? Because as a professional, even in my personal life, what I always sort of attune to or try to remember is what type of life, or what type of, what sort of environment do I want to live in, right? So not me personally, not me just personally, but also for the rest of the community. If it doesn't feel safe, if it doesn't feel good, get out, seek help.
We do try to continue to get a person safe. We put them in a spot that, look, there is help. We could take care of the environment. Our job here is to prevent and save lives. Sometimes these ladies, for some reason, they don't want to move because financial or kids. What we basically do is convince to them, this is not the life. To this life, there's a second chance. We try to involve the CPOs, that's community police. We try to involve Safe Haven. We involve Women's Desk. And we seek help at all ways that we can. Even sometimes we look for housing. We come out our comfort zone, go straight to the housing committee to find a house for this person. Even jobs. I find myself telling them, look, let me help you get someone to get your job, because it's always, most of the time then, it's stability. They're not stable enough. They can't afford it financially. So they try to stay there because there's no way out. And our job here is to listen, this is what's going to happen. And on top of that, the police now, we have to investigate the case. We deal with the perpetrators also. Our goal is to put them behind bars, investigate this on such a level that this person can be punished. Also for the perpetrators now, we have treatment. We have the probation officers that's on board. So you go to your counseling. The perpetrator has to go to counseling, go to sessions, go to workshops. So we broaden it now so they could get the necessary help.
Well, the first thing is I developed something called a life pattern model, and I advise everyone, whether individually to stick to this model. And when you stick to the model, you realize that there's certain things you have to do individually. That's one of the things that's saving, budgeting, and those type of things you have to do as well. Now, if you're in a relationship where the man controls everything, there's one thing you can control is, well, if you're going to do the cooking or whatever, you tell the man, well, I need money to be able to buy food and groceries or whatever. And at the same time, when you get the money, you put aside, you open a savings account or whatever individually, and you just stick some of that money aside. So you do things kind of creatively. Like you're taking care of the home, of course, and I don't think the man will deny that. You're washing his clothes or whatever. But at the same time, when you're getting this money, you allocate a portion aside. If you don't want to open a bank account, you can also open a safety deposit box with a bank. And you can store jewelry in there, you can store documents in there, you can do a bunch of stuff that no one would know about. So there are certain things you can do. And there also is a misconception that as a financial coach, I don't only look at financial aspect, I also have to look at the qualitative aspect as well. How much kids do you have and so forth before I can give the financial advice as well. So it's not only about numbers, it's also about your situation, and I can advise based on if I see certain things going on based on what you tell me.
the innovative Banco-Matico contactless smart card. Your Banco-Matico smart card is now equipped with a contactless feature for payments, so get ready to tap and go. Contactless payments are fast, easy, secure, and accepted worldwide at all Maestro-enabled contactless terminals. Tap for transactions equivalent to or less than 100 NAF, or the US dollar equivalent. You will receive notifications via email anytime you tap. Tap, tap, and pay fast with WIB. For more information, visit our website at wib-bank.net. Tap and go with your partner in progress.
How are you doing this morning?
Good. So, Rebecca, thank you for coming. I work as a psychologist at the Mental Health Foundation. I mainly see children and adolescents, but I also see adults. So whenever there's a crowd, that's when you're starting to feel
nervous.
Okay.
Nauseous.
Okay, it is kind of like your body. We are so used to taking care of our body. If we have a little ache in our foot, we know to rest it. We know, okay, I might have walked too much, so I need to rest. Now, of course, that can be just an ache in my foot, but I can also break my leg. Now, for breaking my leg, I would have to go to the doctor. So that kind of goes the same for mental health illnesses. So you can come in for something little as, I'm really stressed out lately. What would you need? A little bit of rest. But someone can also come in with way more difficulties. We're not here to judge right or wrong, good or bad. Is it helpful for you? Fine. Is it not helpful for you? Okay, then let's see what we can do about it. But not a wrong nor right, absolutely not. It's a magnifying glass without judgment.
Well, there's still a lot of stigma on the island, unfortunately. It's not a topic that people easily talk about, and that's a shame. They're afraid that they get judged, and there is still quite a bit of judgment. I mean, often we hear, don't go to that crazy house. Once you go in, you never go back. And it's just not true, We treat a lot of patients here, and a lot of them, we get back on their feet.
Our goal at the Mental Health Foundation is for us to help you improve your life, for you to live a better, happier, and fuller life.
Some reports that I've received already is that some of the cruise lines are looking still at the end of January. Others have confirmed that they won't restart until March. I have a webinar where I will be presenting all of St. Martin's requirements, including looking out for our taxi drivers and tour companies next week, Friday, with the cruise lines, where we will be sharing all of the requirements and guidelines that we have currently been operating under after this pandemic, as a result of this pandemic. So this is not looking like it's going to be before January. It's looking after. I will have more information once I do my webinar with all of the cruise lines present next week, Friday. I will have a presentation to them, and they will have an opportunity to ask me questions as well. And hopefully the following press briefing after that date, then I'll be able to give you even more information.
Prime Minister, I think we're all kind of sitting on bated breath, watching the COVID statistics locally. We have, been, prior to the last few days, been running in a range of 50 to 80 cases that has now, active cases that now seems to have been increasing to 50, 90 plus in terms of the range we're in. And as we've seen in the international media, there are 2 vaccines that are pending emergency use authorization in the U.S. There was also a 3rd vaccine that showed very promising results in Europe. The Netherlands has indicated in the international media that the islands would be taken care of in their in the share of vaccines that are given to the Netherlands. Have we done any thinking about how those vaccines will be administered and distributed once available to our population, and what might that plan be?
Thank you, Dr. Sock. Indeed, in the bi-weekly discussions held with our Minister of Health, with the other ministers within the Kingdom and the RIVM, those discussions are ongoing, and that will be established via the protocols that come once they are in place. So the discussions are happening, but are not on the current discussion in the Council of Ministers per se, per island. So once they are determined how many vaccines per country and the protocol by which they will be disseminated, that will be divulged via our Minister of Health, and that is in conjunction with the rest of the Kingdom. The cases will continue to be monitored. They are still within a manageable range, and what we also need to continue to monitor is hospitalizations. So those remain quite manageable at the moment, and that's why we continue to implore our people to, while awaiting, this is a worldwide wait in terms of vaccinations or not, and even the large countries around the world have not established as yet who would get first, etc. But under normal circumstances, it is the elderly, those who would normally get the flu shots, would be the first to be protected, so that the rest of the population is able to move a bit more freely. For St. Martin, we are focused on increasing our testing in general. And I think our minister mentioned last week that we were already accepting antigen testing as a prerequisite to enter St. Martin. And of course, we're looking to be able to procure for ourselves so that we are able to disseminate among our healthcare professionals and others, especially in schools and other key services, to avoid unnecessary quarantining and allowing them for economic development, social development, all of it to be able to continue as normally as possible without too many hiccups, so that only the contaminated person would then be isolated. So we are looking at ways to mitigate the amount of people that then go into quarantine by increasing testing. So that's our main focus at the moment until the vaccine is readily available and the protocol is set as to who would be then the first required persons to be vaccinated. Hope to have answered your question whilst our Minister of Health is out.